system. When the EDO cam system was first envisioned, it was set up as just a bunch of cameras to capture some amazing imagery on the surface of Mars. And about a year or so after it was first conceived, I got a phone call.
Я новый запустил вроде.
After talking to headquarters, asked the question, could we possibly put a microphone as part of our EDO camera system? So we worked with the team, we took a look, and sure enough, it was something that we could do.
Скажите, пожалуйста, если кто-нибудь есть, что-нибудь есть тут?
About a year after this first started, I was giving a tour at JPL. And I happened to mention to the group that I was giving the tour to that the decision had come down and we were working to actually include a microphone onto the vehicle. And after the tour was done, a gal came up to me and she said some things to me that I won't forget anytime soon. She said, I'm super excited that you guys are going to try to put a microphone onto the rover and get it to the surface of Mars.
Меня слышно? Скажите, пожалуйста.
Afterwards, I said, I'm curious, why is it that this relates to you so much? And her response was that her sister was visually impaired. She was not able to see these images that we saw earlier or that we sent down in the past. And while she tries to describe them to her, she felt that she just can't quite capture that same sense of amazement that she gets when she gets them visually. And that by actually getting a microphone onto the surface of Mars, the hope was that she'd be able to experience things on Mars the same way that she was when she actually looked at them. And that stuck with me. We continued to work super hard to make sure that this microphone would work. And that's part of the reason we were disappointed why it didn't work when we actually went and did our entry, descent, and landing sequence. I wish I had actually captured that individual's name. I would love to.
Так, спасибо большое всем. Трансляция сбилась, пришлось заново сейчас включать.
You're going to hear in a second is actually the first sounds being recorded from the surface of Mars. So there are two microphones on the Perseverance vehicle. There's this microphone here, which is part of the entry, descent, and landing system, and there's a second microphone that is on the SuperCam instrument.
Сейчас он рассказывал про то, что у него в руках сейчас он держит микрофон. И вот там же на Марсе есть микрофон. Вот. И на Марсе два микрофона, которые будут отвечать за то, чтобы показывать, насколько твердым является порода. А это звук.
So that gentle whirl that happens in the background, that is a noise made by the rover. But yes, what you did hear 10 seconds in was an actual wind gust on the surface of Mars, picked up by the microphone, and sent back to us here on Earth. The analysis indicates that was around a 5 meter per second type of wind gust. So we can sit here now and actually tell you that we have recorded sound.
Да, я не знаю, как это произошло, но он сам по себе, почему-то YouTube решил закончить мою трансляцию.
So you can just hear what the wind would sound like on Mars. And once again, I invite you to sit back and have a listen to what it would sound like to be on Mars. It's cool. It's really neat, overwhelming, if you will. I can't remember what I was going to go and say next.
Ну да, звуки, конечно, которые он сейчас получил, одна часть звуков была тот.
We need to work with the ops team. There's some great science that they're looking to do. We're hopeful that we continue to use these microphones, both the SuperCam microphone.
Что за вопрос был? Напишите, пожалуйста, я сейчас как раз
perhaps the rocks interacting with the surface. SuperCam is going to use theirs to get some great data of them zapping rocks. So as you've heard and will continue to hear, we're just beginning to do amazing things on the surface of Mars. And now Ken is going to talk to you a little bit about the science that we've done to date and what they're looking forward to doing as we continue.
Не знаю, вроде пока не видел.
Thanks, Dave. And I'll start by just taking this opportunity to say to Matt, Dave, Al, and everybody else on this fantastic team, thank you for the ride of a lifetime. That is just incredible what we've seen today, and what I'm sure we'll continue to see as the mission unfolds. So with all the focus on these spectacular videos and audio, we wanted to make sure to remind you that there's plenty of science going on already, with hundreds of team members poring over every new image. So if we can get the first of those images, as you'll see in this navcam frame, we start with what may seem like very basic observations: light rocks, dark rocks, holy rocks. That's holy with an E. We use these very generic terms at this early stage until we have more data that allow us to test our hypotheses and make more confident interpretations. Follow along with the mission.
Ну, то есть в данном случае можно увидеть светлые породы, это как камни в данном случае, реголит сам по себе, и темные породы, темные камни.
Next image, please. Finally, I just want to briefly point out that we are finding
Да,
real science
совершенно
value in
верно.
these
Сначала
ELCAM
они,
videos.
получается,
Here you can see a beautiful new perspective on the
передавали
Езеро Delta.
полный объем
And
информации,
if we get the
и
next
потом
image,
уже сейчас решили провести прямой эфир.
also a new perspective on some of the beautiful stratigraphy around our landing site, which is up near on the far right side of this image. So now to put all of this in context for us, I'll hand it over to
Пропуск был того, что один из членов, получается, который участвовал при создании, взял в руку микрофон и сказал о том, что вот на Марсе такой же микрофон стоит у ровера, только их два микрофона. Как раз-таки они нужны для того, чтобы, когда происходит анализ породы, чтобы можно было понимать, с чем имеем дело, насколько она твердая, насколько она рыхлая и так далее.
A big leap, not just in this case because of at JPL or at NASA, but a big leap as humanity.
Марсианин, да. Тогда да, все понял.
So what's possible today or feels possible is different.
Да, я так и не сказал в итоге, что там на Марсе. Все дело в том, что передача на сам Марс идет на частоте 8401 МГц, а скорость передачи данных достигает 10 килобит в секунду, а прием происходит со скоростью 1,1 килобита в секунду на частоте 7151 МГц. То есть принимаем мы информацию в 10 раз медленнее, чем передаем ее на Марс.
Young people who not only want to explore other worlds and build spacecraft to take them there, but also want to be part of diverse teams achieving.
Еще раз извиняюсь за сбой трансляции.
At the center of that is a team, and I'll ask for the next image. You should know I met this team. I see me there in a dark suit next to Dr. Laurie Glaze, the Planetary Division Director, and Al, he just talked to you, is on his knee in there, and he entered the Senate landing team, and we met him just hours before that historic landing. And I love this picture.
Ну да, это не оптоволокно.
The event today demonstrates that the human aspect of exploration. And that is, of course, every reason for what we can do at NASA and also why we do things. The video and audio and images here provided to us are from the surface of Mars, and sometimes we forget if we look at that. Well, I hope it shouldn't get all the fun. We want to make sure that all of us on Earth see and feel what it's like to be on Mars and explore other worlds. I'm so excited for the more than 1 million students who joined the Mars Student Challenge.
Да, 7 ГГц, то есть получается. Ну да, это облучение, конечно. Но так, а по-другому очень сложно получается.
That are collected by Perseverance now in the near future. Imagine follow the entry, descent, and landing of the first human crew on the planetary surface sometimes in the future. These future historic events, which I'm confident will happen, will be enabled by women and men working in diverse teams. Imagine the goals we can achieve together. So what is possible?
Я постараюсь как раз-таки сегодня уже сделать видео, а завтра выпустить. Ночью сегодня буду работать над тем, чтобы уже завтра в хорошем качестве более подробно об этом и лучше рассказать, потому что сейчас, когда они тут рассказывают, они говорят очень много того, что не касается тематики. Допустим, благодарности, говорить о том, что коллектив очень хороший, помог им очень хорошо. Потом говорить о том, что на будущее мы заложили себе уже давным-давно, когда запускали там Curiosity, Opportunity и другие.
And you innovate, just like we've seen here. We've grown from that seed. Now Perseverance is the size of a small car, and it's ready for us for the next shine leaps. And here's a picture that we're putting up that is one of the many pictures that we're releasing. And of course, it's a picture, one of my absolute favorites, and that's a picture of the sample caching system on there, because it's that sample caching system that will connect this mission to the samples that will bring back to Earth and other historic feed we're working on. This system is on the surface of Mars now. I remember distinctly looking at it before we packed it up from JPL and moved it over. Then, of course,
да, дальность получается большая, а скорость медленная, потому что не получается доставлять информацию быстрее. Ну, то есть быстрее, если информация все равно доходит быстрее, а до нас доходит она намного медленнее.
That human element will fuel our future at Mars, which is bright indeed. And it will fuel the dreams of a new generation that will return to Mars and also study the samples that we will eventually bring home. I'm so grateful to this team and literally the thousands, both at JPL and within
Как
the
я
US and
понимаю,
around the world.
основная часть уже, получается, этой трансляции, она прошла. Сейчас больше все-таки уже говорится про то, что предыдущие миссии тоже получали какую-то определенную информацию, но они не могли дать того, что дала эта миссия. Вот.
What can you find in these pictures? And who's going to compose the first piece of music with actual Mars sound? Mike, Matt, Jennifer, Al, many of you leaders, I could not be more proud of both you and your team. On behalf of our entire NASA leadership team, a heartfelt and a proud thanks to you. For the record, Matt, I'm so glad for your idea about these cameras. We will learn a lot from that, much more than we ever expected. And of course, this is just a start. For the surface team, the real work starts now to evaluate the surrounding and start a plan and our trajectory across Jesero crater. It's a big team and there are lots of discussions, but that's science in action. Stay with us. There is much more amazement to come. Back to you, Raquel.
Thank you, Thomas. And we'll now move on to your questions. Remember, if you are a member of the media on the phone line, you can press star 1
Нет,
to get
до
into
этого
the
ранее,
queue.
Mold, до этого ранее они уже показывали видеоролик посадки, получается. Они смогли заснять видео посадки и также то, каким образом на различных стадиях происходила отстыковка. Также отстыковка от теплового щита, получается, сброс теплового щита, потом раскрывание парашюта показали, после этого показали, как система небесный кран, ну, то есть, потом, получается, весь этот модуль от парашюта отделился, и уже сама система небесный кран посадила марсоход успешно на поверхность Марса. Вот, и все эти моменты на видео показывали. Да, это фрагменты небольшие, но это уже что-то.
That came off. Some of that was expected. In fact, we knew that there was some risk of that as well. And there was, if you look at the video, you can actually see a chunk. That's the radome. It's a cover
Честно, не могу сказать. Я могу сказать только то, что эта миссия, она больше уже направлена именно на биосигнатуру, то есть на различные моменты, которые будут искать признаки прошлой жизни. Поэтому и был выбран кратер Езеро для того, потому что это раньше было каким-то озером древним, и тут, возможно, есть отпечатки прошлой жизни. А что за само видео вы имеете в виду? Ну вот сейчас как раз показывали само видео, которое было снято с Марса. А если вы имеете в виду видео уже с поверхности Марса, то я думаю, это возможно уже только в ближайшее время, да. Согласен.
And for David, why do you think the mic didn't work during descent? Thank you.
I can say a couple words about the first part. I had trouble leaving this mission support area this week just because I kept waiting for every little bit of information to come back from, particularly from these cameras, but from the vehicle in general. And I can tell you, every time we got something, people were overjoyed, giddy. They were like kids.
Но видно, что люди очень сильно трудились и очень сильно старались для того, чтобы эта миссия прошла успешной. Все было сосредоточено на этом, и после...
There's a lot of people that have contributed to this entry, descent, and landing system.
И тебе спасибо, что присоединился к нам на трансляцию. Согласен, это действительно стоящее событие, потому что из тех марсоходов, которые там сейчас находятся, я согласен с этими исследователями, с этими учеными, с этими инженерами, что это самый совершенный аппарат, который сейчас находится на Марсе.
Before you said that, can I just chime in on the first image? This is Justin. I will say, when we get
Да,
the first
согласен.
of these imaging systems,
но есть небольшой такой момент с Марсом, что все-таки мы знаем про ее атмосферу очень мало, а еще знаем, что она очень, скажем так, слабо связана с самой планетой. То есть есть предположение, что через несколько миллионов атмосферы Марса вообще не будет, потому что солнечный ветер постоянно ее и так сдувает.
And so that moment that you get these images from Mars, it's just kind of an electric feeling where it just all just snaps into place, and you get these pictures that are just like perfectly, they're pictures of Mars that you can never simulate here on Earth. And I think that we all experience that, especially after we go through months and months of testing, and the images don't really look that great, and people get skeptical, like, are these cameras really that great? Because that looks like a garage or something. It's just amazing to get these pictures, and I think we all feel that way.
Ну да, с другой стороны, это логично, потому что как бы это последний аппарат, и он должен быть самым новым там. Вот. Но все же тут, наверное, совершенство подразумевается немного по другим, что раньше, когда мы могли смотреть образцы, получали, они не могли ничего с этими образцами сделать. А этот марсоход, он может запечатать образцы для того, чтобы будущие миссии могли прийти, забрать образцы и унести их на Землю. Вот.
It was a great feeling. I mean, from where I was sitting, I not only was excited to see these videos and what we had captured, it was also the fact that a lot of people had put in a lot of effort in to make this system work. And to actually reward that effort and to pay it back and get this excitement going, it made me super happy. I was glad to see that all the hard work, all the dedication had come in, and that everyone was just excited about not only what we had captured, but also what this mission could do going forward. it was a great feeling. It was a feeling I won't forget for quite some time. And then regarding the question about the microphone, we started to look at it. What we think happened is that there was a communication error.
Тут вопрос еще заключается в том, что все дело в ядре Марса, и получается тогда в этом случае в магнии, в мантии. И тогда ведь есть предположение, что вулканическая активность на Марсе уже давно пропала. Да, недавно были вбросы информации о том, что якобы там какой-то вулкан начал обратно, скажем так, активность проявлять. Но это очень такое, это вброс просто информации, которая официально пока ничего про это не сказали. Ну, по крайней мере, я не видел. Вот, поэтому что будет, не знаю, и вообще можно ли каким-то образом там вулканическую деятельность. Это тогда получается надо, как Илон Маск сказал о том, что просто взять ядерные ракеты, послать туда и забомбить. Но это как-то не совсем целесообразно. Ну, если это будут герметичные, определенные, получается, образцы в герметичных каких-нибудь сосудиках, тогда нет, они могут остаться там, плюс ко всему там очень низкая температура. Вот. Насчет того, что новый вирус, ну, кто знает, но вряд ли там есть такая жизнь вирусная, скажем так. Ведь для вирусной жизни тоже нужно, чтобы вирус тоже не может просто обитать в воздухе, у него должен быть какой-то хозяин. Вот.
To try to make sure that in the dynamic environment of launch and then that mortar fire event that I talked about, that the camera will continue to operate. And then we had to swap out a couple pieces on the inside because in the vacuum of space, they had the ability to outgas material. And if that material deposited itself on the detector, then we wouldn't get the clear images that we actually got. But other than that, it was not specially designed for use for this application. It is a commercial off-the-shelf camera.
Thank you. And up next, we have Michael Sheets from CNBC.
Hi, congratulations again on capturing stunning footage of this landing. I'm curious on two aspects. I mean, one, Adam Seltzer, you guys had said that in 15 years since he really engineered the sky crane, he never actually seen it in operation. I'm curious what Adam thinks about seeing.
Ну да, это всегда опасность того, что ты можешь Марс сам заселить чем-то. И даже когда говорят о том, что он прошел стопроцентную стерильность, стопроцентной стерильности не бывает. Невозможно на Земле сделать условия стопроцентной стерильности.
Trying to get people on the surface of Mars?
Well, let's see. Adam's not up here, but I can channel him for just a moment.
Ну тут, опять же, все зависит от ядра Марса. Вот, допустим, у нашей Земли, а это активное ядро, и поэтому у нас есть магнитное поле, которое нас защищает от солнечного ветра. У нас есть все для этого, и поэтому наша атмосфера, она поддерживается. А, допустим, на Марсе предполагается, что остывшее ядро уже, все, оно никакое. И поэтому есть такое предположение, что из-за этого Марс, у Марса точно предполагается, что нету вообще магнитных полей, как бы. Вот. Ну а если нет магнитных полей, то защиты очень мало. И одна из проблем для заселения — это защита от солнечного ветра, от излучения космического. Потому что атмосфера Марса тебя не защитит от этого.
Is designed inherently to interact with the uncertainties that Mars throws at you, and so I think being able to see his system operate like this, in high definition, landing at Езеро, it doesn't get too much better than that, I don't think. So I'm going to throw it to Al. He can maybe say a few words about the types of technologies and information that we have on the technologies on the system and information we got getting back from EDL, and we'll be getting back as part of our reconstruction activity that feed into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about a lot of things. I mean, but as Matt mentioned, you know, as a fresh-faced kid, when the sky was invented, and I was in that room, and it's amazing to see it finally in action. Even though we knew it worked once, we didn't know for sure it was going to work again, and then for it to work again, and then for us to see it is incredible. And just starting with the sky crane there, you can see some things that I think are going to be useful to the future. One thing that's, of course, of a lot of interest, especially as we start landing bigger things, is the plume ground interaction. The interaction between those rockets and what they're doing to the ground and how they kick things around. And we've got great video of that here this time, both from the rover download camera and the descent stage download camera. We can see how those, how they create those scours and stuff.
Я думал, что они будут все-таки еще рассказывать немного о Марс Helicopter, который все-таки вертолет беспилотный, первый на, получается, Марс, на планете Марс, как бы. Я думал, они будут рассказывать, как они хотят привести в действие его, но пока что в основном вот они говорят только про все стадии, и причем постоянно повторяются.
You know, SRL, other missions are going to use, future missions like the sample retrieval missions, are likely going to use things like parachutes and rockets, of course. So we're very interested in seeing how those cameras and what we see in those camera images can teach us about how those systems are actually performing and make our systems more robust in the future.
Thanks, Alan. Matt. Up next, we have Ken Chang from the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you can give me a few more details about how the data came back. Those 30 gigabytes that was collected, how much has come back, and what was the data rate that you were able to send them information back? Thank you.
Maybe Jessica can...
So I can say that as part of our commission activity, we actually walk the data rate up over the course of our different overflights with the orbiters.
Ну, до исследования Марса Илоном Маском, как по мне, еще далековато. Постоянно даты переносятся. Сначала был 27-й, потом 29-й, сейчас 30 какой-то там год, по-моему. Ну, вряд ли. Все-таки это такая плотность у ядра, там, что вряд ли что-то сможет его там пробурить. Мне кажется, невозможно будет насквозь. Да, вообще до ядра еще дойти как бы нужно. Мне кажется, при нынешних наших технологиях невозможно дойти до ядра. Все-таки какое-никакое тепло, еще остаток того, что было, оно все равно еще дополнительно сохраняется.
And we've had, I don't know, well, we've had a lot of them now, like 5 or 10 of them.
We've typically had about 2 to 3 overflights per night, and it does vary. The rates I was referring to are the communication rates from the rover to the orbiter. And then once that's collected...
Ну, тут сейчас они уже больше все-таки разговаривают на такие темы, типа обсуждение просто, сколько мегабайт там будет что-то весить. Вот. Насчет данных, которые будут получены. Вот. Но опять же, я думал, что они что-то еще скажут про Марс Helicopter, потому что мне как-то это пока что более интересно, потому что каким образом они будут ее активировать. Ведь после первого полета может вообще все пойти не по плану, и после этого Марс Helicopter будет бесполезен. Но если получится все, то он должен будет еще 3-4 полета сделать. Ну вот сейчас говорят про то, что видео, которые получили они в определенных форматах.
You saw some of the terrific imagery from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. We've been getting fantastic support from the orbiter community, not just MRO for both that imagery and the comms.
Нет, я не могу точно сказать, потому что это... Я не могу утверждать даже, потому что это просто предположение. Я не знаю, как там устроен грунт, я не знаю, но мне кажется, все-таки, так как это каменистая планета, скажем так, что структура мантии и остальное, оно примерно такое же, литосферная плита и такое же, как на Земле примерно. Просто ядро остывшее. И тогда в этом случае получается, что мы же даже на Земле не можем преодолеть литосферную плиту. То получается, а как мы можем говорить вообще о Марсе?
Yeah, I mean, what do you see it doing aside from recording Martian wind and the sound of the dirt under the wheels and so on?
Но все-таки тут, в данном случае, более интересным представляют биологические исследования именно строматолитов. Ну вот, то, что на чем мы как раз-таки у меня стрим улетел про микрофон. И сейчас как раз говорится, но уже немного про шумов, которые будут получать для того, чтобы определение их для определения, эти аудиофайлы для определения того, чтобы поверхность Марса знать, рыхлая она, не поверхность, а именно образцы, рыхлые они или что. Причем ведь эти микрофон, ну, эти звуки, они будут не просто связаны, просто чистый звук, нет, они будут вместе с видео, то есть таким образом, сопоставляя видео и звук, мы будем видеть, что там происходит и вообще, что это за образец. Ну а если Марс-хеликоптер не сможет подняться в воздух Марса и просто прикинется вентилятором, то что тогда? Значит, на Марсе червяков, что ли, нет? Но насчет Марса-хеликоптера я не могу сказать, но я думаю, что получится. Просто я хотел информацию услышать от них про Марс-хеликоптер, дополнительную какую-то. Но пока что до этого не дошло, а видеоролик они уже в основном именно посадки показали. Насчет червяков на Марсе, ну, не знаю, пока что их не обнаружили. Вот. И мне кажется, пока их нету. Только если люди туда их занесли. Но и то они должны были уже давно умереть.
Well, I can say that application was one of the things that we had projected and tested and wanted to make sure that even though this was a capability that was part of the cruise and entry, descent and landing software package that we're operating right now, we've also carried that capability forward into our surface software. And so,
если кто только что подключился, основную уже то, что должны были показать на этой трансляции, показали. Видеофрагменты все показали, что произошло, каким образом марсоход сел. Эти все фрагменты были записаны, их передавали, было получено огромное количество данных, и поэтому они провели прямой эфир, получается, для того, чтобы показать, что вообще они обнаружили.
Everybody knows that when you hear something squeaking, it's diagnostic. Maybe you need to check it out, and it tells you a little bit about how it works. And so we will find out how these get used. It's actually kind of exciting, and we're getting.
Не знаю, недавно говорили про рыбалку на Титане, спутники Сатурн, и поэтому спутники Сатурн и Титан, вот недавно про него, считай, говорили, и был видеоролик как раз про то, что море Кракена, оказывается, его глубина может достигать 300 метров. А так как там все-таки в основном метановые озера, то тоже не порыбачишь.
Great. And up next is Lisa Grossman from Science News.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. The video is amazing, and a lot of it looks a lot like the animations that you've shown before the landing to kind of advertise this. Excuse me. Going forward, how will you distinguish the
Насчет
video
инопланетян,
that's real video
ну,
from the
кто
animation
знает, кто
to kind
знает.
of make it clear to people what they're looking at and
Может, они
keep them from
действительно
getting
там
confused
есть.
or not be fuel for conspiracy theorists saying we haven't actually done this.
I guess I could try to take that one. I mean, I think we should label very clearly which ones are from Mars and not. I think it's clear to a lot of us, but I think you're right, given the way that the animation's been pretty good. I get a sense for how that could be confusing. I think we should label them going forward. Now that we have this kind of video, we should be clear about what's real.
What a great problem to have.
Exactly. I mean, it's an amazing problem to have.
Justin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can attest to it's real. It's actually real. I know because I know the data very well. It's stunning and it's real. And that was our thought too when we first saw it. We're like, wow, this looks like doesn't look real, but it is, and that's what's so amazing about it. And you know, I know I've seen some of the video games are getting pretty good. You know,
Сейчас уже, получается, им задают вопросы, они на них отвечают, но актуальности этих вопросов пока что сам я пока не увидел.
Quarter speed or even slower because there's so much detail in there that anyone who's done animations knows that would take a lot of time to do. And it all happened so quickly, and the camera cut everything.
Нет.
So that's how we know it's real because we know.
К сожалению, таких пока что не обнаружено.
That's one way that you could look at. But yeah,
there's one other thing I forgot too. I remember early on MSL when they started coming up with the animation for Curiosity's landing, we had a discussion about the plumes actually coming out of the descent stage, and the fact that they were clear and that you wouldn't see them in real life, like you don't see them in the rover upload camera. But we thought that it would be that people would be expecting to see them in the animation, so they took some artistic license.
Я что-то пропустил в этот момент. Армянское радио спрашивает, НАСА отвечает.
The clear plumes, like you see in the real video.
Yeah, the same comment for.
Сейчас идет 36-я минута. В прошлый раз, я правильно понимаю, что на 40-й минуте как раз-таки стрим вырубился?
Kind of last minute, and you know, as the rover's getting built and people slap things on and they're not in the drawing, so the animators don't pick it up. And that's another thing that's amazing about this video. Every single detail is in there, so encourage people to look at it. It's fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. It really is some beautiful detail. Now we have a social media question to take. Jerome on Twitter asks, some pictures we can see dirt and small rocks inside the real wheel.
Где большие залежи железа и золота? Про что это?
Yep, I can speak to that. So it's not uncommon for us to have rocks and dirt inside the wheels, either from the landing event or as we're driving across the surface. You'll also notice on the deck, we also experienced some of that debris coming down on top of the rover. And we design our mechanisms for these conditions so we don't expect any issue with the material from the landing event or as we continue to rove across the surface.
Thanks, Jessica. And right now we have
Честно сказать, не могу. Не слышал до этого, что там вот железо, само собой, а золото я не слышал до этого. Коронавирус на Марс. Мне кажется, коронавирусу при таких погодных условиях, как на Марсе, будет очень плохо.
It's a one-ton rover. It's pretty sizable, but you know, when you're talking about human missions,
картошку и рис.
It's much larger. So, what does being able to see this dust tell us about the challenge of landing future kind of much larger spacecraft on Mars? Is that something that you're going to have to account for, and if is it going to be a really significant issue to deal with? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. I mean, I think, as most people know, right there, as far as I'm aware, there are no landing pads on Mars or barges that we can land on, prepared places. So we're going to have to deal with, especially if we're going to use propulsion, we're going to have to deal with this plume-ground interaction. And it's really difficult. It's difficult to get right, to get the modeling right, to understand it, or even to do a real test that shows a good impression of what you're going to come down on, especially when you don't know exactly where you're going and what the terrain is like. And what the ground properties are where you're coming down. So I do think this is a big challenge for us going forward. And that's why collecting this information here is useful. We can certainly begin to see how it actually behaved in real life and see how things began to move and what those scours are like. and we have a vehicle that'll tell us what the ground that we happened to land on was like, and we know how we were commanding those engines and where they were pointed. So we have a rich treasure trove here of data that we can use to kind of get at that kind of challenge. Because I do think it's a big one, especially as we start to land heavier and heavier things with bigger and bigger engines.
And up next on the phone lines is Joey Roulette from The Verge.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Earlier it was mentioned that scientists are already pouring through the thousands and thousands of images, and I was just wondering what about the surface or the rocks that you guys have seen so far from these images are standing out, and kind of what has been interesting from a scientific perspective. Thanks.
Ken, Ken's there?
Yeah.
Okay, Ken.
Sure. So you can go online and see that image that was put up during my little bit there. But we're noticing basically the different colors that we see and textures and tones. And so one thing that's striking to me, standing out to me and some of us, is that a lot of the rocks that are labeled as light rocks seem to have a rough texture, whereas some of the darker rocks further afield that are higher standing, more like large boulders, seem to be smoother. That can mean something about the grain size and the potentially the composition of the rocks themselves. One of the things we're noting as the resolution gets better is that these light rocks closer to the foreground may actually be kind of dark on the inside, and that the light tone we see may be
Да нет,
largely
я
due
думаю,
to
все-таки
dust
в данном
coverings,
случае
and where the rocks
это
stand
так
up
не
a bit
работает
higher and have less dust,
насчет
they tend to
золота.
appear dark. So a lot of, new patterns are emerging. And then, of course, one of the most exciting and interesting things are these, what we call the holy rocks, that are, in some cases right under our wheels, and these smaller cobbles that are right around the rover. I didn't mention, but, one of the possibilities for those holes is that they are what we would call vesicles, which would be due to the gas escape from a volcanic rock. We're not calling them vesicles at this point because it's important for us to stay open to the, different possible interpretations and not get locked in yet on limited data. But if they are volcanic rocks, that is enormously important to us, because it potentially provides an opportunity to get a really nice radiometric age or an absolute date if a sample like that comes back to Earth. But then again, if you go back to images from many previous Mars missions, rovers and otherwise, you'll see that wind abrasion can cause those sorts of holes in all different types of rocks. So just a few of the thoughts that are emerging. And then, of course, we're starting to get views of the Delta Front now, which just have us, on cloud nine, looking at some of the targets further afield that we're excited to explore.
Great. Thanks, Ken. We have another phone line question. Mark Zastro from Astronomy Magazine.
Hi. Thanks for taking my question. I guess this is a question for Al. And I was just wondering if you could speak to the performance of the landing vision system, if you've gotten a chance to dive into that, how the range figure and terrain relative navigation really performed, and just sort of what it was thinking, how it was making its decisions as it descended. And then when you look at its performance and its accuracy, how do you judge it? And can you see that improvement over Curiosity?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean,
Ну да, но все дело в том, что высокого давления и вулканической деятельности давным-давно уже нету на Марсе.
In fact, here's some stats, right? Based on the targeted, well, we took many images on the way down. We got tons of landmarks. We were very able to match up what we saw with our onboard map. It was almost perfect, better than many of our field tests or even simulations. So we got a very good lock on where we were. And in fact, when you combine that with our safe target selection and where we flew to, we only missed the targeted pixel by about 5 meters. So we were aiming for a particular spot on the planet once it decided what was reachable and what the safest spot was. And given how well the lander vision system performed and our system in flying us there, we only missed by 5 meters. So that was really great. I mean, I think we've really showed that this system can do what we wanted it to do in helping us figure out where to go and go to a safe spot.
Great, thanks, Al. We have so many questions coming in that we are going to keep the phone lines open for a little while longer. Remember to press *1 to get in our queue. For now, I'm going to take a social media question from Bob on Twitter, who asks, how does the processing power of the onboard computer compare to a great smartphone? Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. You know, in the space business, we have to build things that we know are gonna work. And space is a pretty hostile environment, and the surface of Mars is even worse.
Для тех, кто только присоединился, давайте еще раз посмотрим эти фрагменты, потому что сейчас уже ничего интересного как такового не происходит. Момент, когда уже ровер вошел в атмосферу,
Perseverance is now slowed to subsonic speeds, and the heat shield has been separated. This allows both the radar and the cameras to get their first look at the surface. Current velocity is 145 meters per second at an altitude of about 9.5 kilometers above the surface.
Nav filter converge. Velocity solution 3.3 meters per second. Altitude 7.4 kilometers.
Now has radar locked on the ground. Current velocity is
7,4
about 100 meters per
осталось.
second, 6.6 kilometers above the surface of Mars.
До этого мы могли наблюдать, как тепловой щит был
Perseverance
сброшен.
is continuing to descend on the parachute. We are coming up on the initialization of terrain relative navigation and subsequently the priming of the landing engines. Our current velocity is about 90 meters per second at an altitude of 4.2 kilometers.
LVS valid.
We have confirmation that the lander vision system has produced a valid solution and part of terrain relative navigation.
Priming. TBA is nominal.
We have priming of the landing engines.
Back shell set.
Current velocity is 83 meters per second at about 2.6 kilometers from the surface of Mars. We have confirmation that the back shell has separated. We are currently performing the Divert Maneuver. Current velocity is about 75 meters per second at an altitude of about 1 kilometer off the surface of Mars.
Here in safety Bravo.
We have completed our terrain relative navigation. Current speed is about 30 meters per second, altitude of about 300 meters off the surface of Mars. We have started our constant velocity accordion, which means we are conducting the sky crane, about to conduct the sky crane maneuver. Sky crane maneuver has started, about 20 meters off the surface.
We're getting signals from MRO.
Tango Delta.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
It gives me goosebumps every time I see it. Just amazing. I hope everybody kept
camera, and let me give you a quick warning that you can get a sense of how violent that parachute deploy and inflation are. The parachute is packed so densely that
Опять же, причем это видео подтверждение многим тем, кто говорил о том, что это все вранье, это все просто мультики. Причем очень часто начал встречать под роликом, который вышел недавно, вот такие вот комментарии. Там была действительно анимация, там не было там не показывали прям реальные кадры. А вот тут мы действительно можем видеть реальные кадры.
Okay, so let's try to walk through this a bit slower, this time at about quarter speed, and we'll pause at times to point out things we see. So let's start that rolling. Okay, here you can see the pack getting pushed out of there. You can kind of see the pack right in the middle as it's being pushed, and the parachute lid, which is right on top of it, it's kind of that circle to the left of the pack, was on top of the pack. It was there to protect the parachute during entry. It's got some thermal protection system material on it to keep the parachute nice and cool and protected. And the pack is used to push that lid right off the vehicle, given that cannon force. You can also see some of the other things that have popped off of that lid, which is kind of expected given how violent this launch really is. So let's move on from here. So we keep going out here. You can see the pack reach what we call line stretch. So that's as far as it's going to go. It's where the parachute's going to start inflating. That's about 150 feet behind the spacecraft.
Какой сквозняк под марсоходом имеется в виду? Во время посадки? Если во время посадки имеется в виду, то во время посадки там не просто, это же не просто сквозняк, который ниоткуда взялся, а это же небесный кран. Система небесный кран как раз-таки во время посадки и образует это.
There's no evidence of tangling of the lines, which is great. There's about 2 miles of lines in the parachute system. So the fact that we don't see any evidence of tangling or any kind of other misbehavior is great news. And I'm sure we'll be studying this video for many, many years and picking it apart frame by frame. And of course, we have a second camera on board as well that recorded this launch and inflation of the parachute. You might notice the pattern that's on the parachute here. Distinct patterns are useful in helping us determine the clocking or orientation of the parachute. Also, the contrasting sections can be useful in tracking different positions of the parachute, different portions of the parachute as it inflates. So it's especially useful when we have multiple cameras, as we do here, and are trying to track features in the parachute inflating. In addition to enabling incredible science, we hope our efforts and our engineering can inspire others. Sometimes we leave messages in our work for others to find for that purpose. So we invite you all to give it a shot and show your work. Let's move on to the rover downlook camera and take a look at that in a little bit more detail. So if we start that up, you can see the heat shield falling away very nicely and symmetrically. Pausing here, we can take a look at what we see on the heat shield. First, we see the medley components on the heat shield. You can see the electronics box and the gold wires that lead to all the various sensors that measure the aerodynamics and heating.
Возможно, такую иллюстрацию, скажем так, такое фото все-таки сделают, когда ночь будет на Марсе. Вот. А так в действительности существует только одна панорама даже там не ночная, а когда солнце заходит, заката, но и то она составлена из изображения, то есть не видео снято, а именно изображение.
If you look at the other 8 springs, they actually are where they're supposed to be, all around the edge of the heat shield. There's no danger to the spacecraft here, but it's something we didn't expect and something we wouldn't have seen if we didn't have the camera system to show us.
Я один штурман один, пожалуй, я это комментировать не буду.
The heat shield basically stays in the same orientation as it flies away from us. It'll come back into view in a little bit. But this is great. This is kind of what we expected in terms of the aerodynamics of that heat shield. It doesn't tumble or do something weird that was unexpected in flight. So that's very useful to have this video to show us that. So in the interest of time, let's skip ahead to about 15 seconds before backshell separation. So starting this video here, you can see that the spacecraft is rocking back and forth while hanging under the parachute. This rocking is less than it was earlier in flight, but pretty much what we expect. There, that white flash was backshell separation, and you can see us throttle up and begin our divert maneuver. You can see the vehicle's turned over, so we're actually beginning to fly east. And that's why you can see the delta over there. As it maneuvers eastward to the eventual landing site, it actually passes over the field of view, will pass over the landing site, and then kind of overshoot it a little bit because it's got to stop that horizontal divert that we did. You can see everything's nice and smooth now that the engines are under control. That on-sheet parachute rocking is gone. So here we are, slowing down and stopping, and we're coming straight down on our eventual landing site here. You can see that as we really begin to slow down here, you can see the engines as we get lower throttle up there and stop us here, and you can see it beginning to push all that dust around on the ground on the 2 sides. That shaking there is the rover deploying and the mobility during sky crane, and here we are coming down, and that rocking motion of the rover we'll see in other videos. But that settles down right before we hit the ground in a nice, safe, flat spot. There doesn't appear to be too much of concern that's right below us. So that was the rover's view looking down. Let's take a look at the descent stage view looking down as well during that sky crane portion of flight.
Как раз схема работы небесного крана. Вот. И то есть это не просто сквозняк откуда-то взялся, это работа небесного крана, который образует вихрь небольшой под марсоходом и вообще, то есть в округе марсохода. При том, что это была самая первая автономная посадка с использованием небесного крана на Марсе. До этого приходилось надувные защитные парашюты делать для того, чтобы марсоход там не разбивался, потому что очень часто происходило так, что марсоход разбивался как раз. Небесный кран — это специальная система, при помощи которого марсоход зацеплен на 4 троса и, получается, автономно садится. И посадка происходит не так, что он сразу врезается, а вот именно за счет работы небесного крана, который сверху располагается, марсоход постепенно снижается. Вот, сейчас мы можем как раз это видеть. Вот, сверху, вот это как раз и есть сам небесный кран, который держит на вот этих вот тросах марсоход. Вот. Дальше он сажает марсоход. Надеюсь, я понятно рассказал. Если непонятно, в принципе, я могу сейчас тогда переключить на картинки специально и показать более детально. Ну что значит на Луну? На Луне у нас есть луноходы, причем их не один там их сейчас очень много. А на Марсе марсоходы как бы. Тут же не говорится про, опять же, людей, вот, которых я не затрагиваю, и в политику, опять же, я не буду лезть подобную. Просто это марсоходы, это космические аппараты. А космические аппараты уже давно у нас на различных небесных телах, на различные небесные тела летают к ним, посещают их. При том, что у нас даже есть космические аппараты, которые забирают с собой образцы грунта с астероидов. Ой, астероиды, говорю, кометы и карликовых планет.
So now we're watching about quarter speed. Things are getting pretty dusty here as we get down toward the bottom. Take a look here at the bottom left of this picture. You'll see actually the instant that we cut the descent stage away. And you'll see those rattles begin to get retracted up toward that descent stage as they're pulled up. And this is as planned. See as they got yanked up there right before. And then we'll see the descent stage begin to turn and ascend and head out toward the northwest with the umbilical dangling behind it. Since the rover was pointed almost directly to southeast, the descent stage chose to go toward the back.
Что имеете в виду на Землю полетит? Если вы имеете в виду про образцы, которые должен взять этот космический аппарат, этот марсоход должен взять свои определенные образцы, которые запечатать, и не он сам полетит на Землю, а как раз-таки космические аппараты с Земли придут, ракетоносители другие, они придут, не ракетоносители. Готовится специальная миссия, которая должна прилететь на Марс и забрать как раз-таки эти образцы у марсохода Персеверанс, и у него забрать эти образцы и уже привезти их к нам на Землю. Потому что если посмотреть на миссии, то уже сейчас готовится вот эта вот миссия. Она пока что на стадии разработки для того, чтобы прилететь и забрать образцы.
Like Matt and Dave and Jennifer and Rick and others on the project, I've actually worked on all 5 of the NASA rover missions, and as part of my job, I review images from Mars like every day. That's what I do. And when I saw these images come down, I have to say, I was truly amazed. And I know it's been a tough year for everybody, and we're hoping that maybe these images will, help brighten people's day. smartphones and make them your screen backgrounds and things. I'm just really happy that it all worked out. So now we're on Mars, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the weekend.
Да, сейчас дальше будут говорить уже про то, сколько гигабайтов, что они получили огромное количество гигабайтов данных, что камеры, при которой они получают сейчас изображение 20 мегапикселей также, и также, что информация до сих пор приходит на Землю от этого марсохода. Но опять же, про Марс-хеликоптер я так и ничего не услышал, но так понимаю, что в этот сейчас, на данный момент, они не будут ничего про Марс-хеликоптер говорить, а именно говорят про посадку, о том, что про все навигационные системы, всю аппаратуру, которую добавили к этому марсоходу, при помощи которого будут исследовать Марс.
So it's 1/4 of the full resolution of the camera, so it's been shrunk down. But you can see right there the vista that we're seeing. This is the rover, obviously, on Mars, and you can see some of the material that landed on the deck. But everything looks in good shape, and so we're using these images to inspect not only the vehicle, but the surface around us. The next slide shows the view down towards the surface.
Возможно, что система, при которой они будут забирать с Марса, будет такая же похожая как раз-таки на система, с которой они будут забирать с Марса образцы, будет похожа как раз на то, что как и посадили, получается, этот марсоход на поверхность с помощью небесного крана. Туда отправляется 10 килобит в секунду, но, по крайней мере, говорилось об этом, с какой скоростью этому марсоходу отправляют, я не знаю, но я знаю, что в среднем 10 килобит в секунду как раз-таки отправляется с такой скоростью на Марс команды, а с Марса получают уже 1,1 килобита в секунду. Ну, скорость.
Shows the full panorama from the nav cam stitched together. We're still working out with calibration and things, so this is approximate color, but it just gives you a feel for the vista here that our new environment that we're going to explore, and we're hoping everyone will join us in seeing these images. Today we're going to be releasing a whole slew of raw images. It's been a fire hose of data, basically. We have thousands of images already from the EDL cameras, nav cams.
Ну, насчет золота я не знаю.
So we will be putting those out on the website today for people to download and process yourself, or just look at the great pictures.
Твиттер НАСА, который связан с этим марсоходом, активно говорил о том, чтобы все люди продолжали публиковать информацию об этом марсоходе. То есть они хотят, чтобы все средства массовой информации, абсолютно все заполонило этим марсоходом. Я думаю, этим они спокойно в скором времени окупятся. Нет, сервису Google Maps верить вообще невозможно, потому что там постоянно находят всяких инопланетян и так далее, а в итоге оказывается, что это все просто какая-то фигня.
Instrument, that's the rover uplink camera, that's the camera that actually took the video of the sky plane.
Рогозин.
And then in the bottom of the frame is the Mastcam Z calibration target.
Дальше орбиты Земли нам нет хода. Это максимум для человека. В том виде, какой сейчас человек. На Марсе нет золота. За ним сюда летают.
We're going to be commissioning SuperCam over the next few days. And then finally, just as a teaser, I'll point out that there is a little antenna there to the right on that box, the center right. That is the helicopter antenna. That's the helicopter base station location. And preview of things
Хорошо, и вам удачи.
excited about that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk about latest status.
All right, thank you, Justin. I know you can attest firsthand to being in the control room and the excitement that everybody has been experiencing, seeing all these images from the surface, and as they come down, we're immediately sharing them and everybody clapping and smiles all around. So, great camera suite. So I am happy to report that Perseverance is healthy and continuing with activities as we have been planning them over the first few sols on the surface. To date, which is really only just 3 sols of activities and one more, and coming up later this afternoon, we've executed 5,000 commands. So lots of instructions to the vehicle for her to perform, and having everything come back exactly how we've been wanting it to with respect to our health checkouts and our instrument checkouts. So things have been going well. A couple key highlights. So we have fired and released our launch lock restraints to allow mechanisms to be deployed. We saw the remote sensing mast, but one of those also being the high gain antenna. Now, this is important for the high gain antenna to be deployed because it increases our uplink rate to the rover, and so it will allow us to send a higher volume of instructions to items that you see in this image. So you can see that we have our coring drill in the center, our pixel and Sherlock instruments mounted to the side, and that black tank.
Эту часть мы уже смотрели, я просто поставил для людей, которые, возможно, еще не видели. Вот. Потому что дальше я сейчас одновременно смотрю, что там дальше происходит в прямом эфире, но ничего интересного как такового пока что там нету.
So we are very excited to be happily on the surface and exercising our system and looking for what's ahead. So going back to our partnership with the larger Mars spacecraft and science teams and community, we're really excited that the MRO spacecraft, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and the HiRISE team was able to find our hardware on the surface of Mars. And so if you see in this image, if the next pop-up, you can see that we have the descent stage, the parachute, and the heat shield all here in this image. With a few stats here, the descent stage is about 700 meters away from where Perseverance is on the surface. Parachute is about 1.2 kilometers, and the heat shield about 1.5 kilometers. And so it's very exciting that we can see all these different components now that we've landed on the surface. And as a special treat, the HiRISE image was able to actually acquire the entry, descent, and landing event from their perspective, and we can never have enough images of this activity, and so this is a fantastic view. But I'm going to send it back to Dave here. He as part of this suite, we have one more surprise, or one more gift, I'll say, that we've been able to receive from this package. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jessica. So I think we probably have overloaded your visual sense for a little bit, but we're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to have some fun here for a second, too. So I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to talk to you now with this.
Вот момент, в котором я прервался, в котором стрим прервался, к сожалению, про микрофон, когда он рассказывает как раз про то, что если у него сейчас в руке один микрофон, то как раз-таки на марсоходе установлен и микрофон, и камера одновременно для того, чтобы понимать, с чем они имеют дело, какой звук он издает. Зная, какой звук издает микрофон, мы можем знать, рыхлая это поверхность, что там происходит, насколько он твердый и так далее.
And so we started off that detailed design and identifying a microphone that would work for us and getting it onto the vehicle. About a year after this first started, I was giving a tour at JPL. And I happened to mention to the group that I was giving the tour to that the decision had come down and we were working to actually include a microphone onto the vehicle. And after the tour was done, a gal came up to me, and she said some things to me that I won't forget anytime soon. She said, I'm super excited that you guys are going to try to put a microphone onto the rover and get it to the surface of Mars. And I was very appreciative. And I asked her afterwards, I said, I'm curious, why is it that this relates to you so much? And her response was that her sister was visually impaired. She was not able to see these images that we saw earlier or that we sent down in the past. And while she tries to describe them to her, she felt that she just can't quite capture that same sense of amazement that she gets when she gets them visually. And that by actually getting a microphone at the surface of Mars, the hope was that she'd be able to experience things on Mars the same way that she was when she actually looked at them. And that stuck with me. We continued to work super hard to make sure that this microphone would work. And that's part of the reason we were disappointed why it didn't work when we actually went and did our entry, descent, and landing sequence. I wish I had actually captured that individual's name. I would love to reach out to her now and say, we've done it. I hope your sister is enjoying it. Because what I'm going to show you in a second, or what you're going to hear in a second, is actually the first sounds being recorded from the surface of Mars. So there are two microphones on the Perseverance vehicle. There's this microphone here, which is part of the entry, descent, and landing system. And there's a second microphone that is on the SuperCam instrument. And we're counting on both of these instruments, recording some absolutely amazing sounds from the surface of Mars. So with that, I invite you now to, if you would like to close your eyes and just imagine yourself sitting on the surface of Mars and listening to the surroundings. If I could have the first one, please.
Это звук, который был записан. Ну, в принципе, я так понимаю, наверное, можно потихоньку заканчивать все.
So that gentle whirl that happens in the background, that is a noise made by the rover.
Ну, что есть, к сожалению, то и есть. Простая она или какая, по крайней мере, не жалуюсь. Спасибо, Николай Бычков. Ну, возможно, действительно, каким-то образом я думаю, они же каким-то образом уже все продумали, каким образом забирать образцы. Вот.
I invite you to sit back and have a listen to what it would sound like to be on Mars.
Но не знаю. Но вот этот звук, кстати, он... Вот этот шум, звук с поверхности Марса, он, конечно, прям до дрожи, действительно, мурашки по коже. Все, трансляция закончилась и у нас тоже, и всем спасибо большое. Хорошо. Можно написать в сообщество, группу ВК, я буду только рад. Огромное всем спасибо за то, что присутствовали в трансляции. И еще раз приношу свои извинения за постоянный вылет трансляции, за то, что пришлось менять трансляцию с одного на другой. К сожалению, не до конца, по ходу разобрался еще с этой программой. Буду работать, буду смотреть, как это все делается. Огромное всем спасибо еще раз, что присутствовали. Всем очень сильно благодарен. Берегите